The UN Climate Conference in Brazil has concluded with an agreement to triple funding for developing countries to cope with climate impacts. The COP30 summit in Belém secured commitments to increase adaptation, finance, and support workers transitioning to clean energy. However, the final agreement omitted any direct mention of fossil fuels, despite calls from many countries for stronger action. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres acknowledged progress, but warned that the gap between current efforts and scientific requirements remains dangerously wide. The summit also launched new initiatives, including a gender and climate action plan and technology support for developing countries. For an informed review of the just concluded Climate Change Summit COP30 in Brazil, the takeaways and what the outcomes mean for Nigeria and Africa, Director of the Center for Development Communication, Dr. Audu Oseni, joins us now on Newsday. Good afternoon, Dr. Oseni. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon for having me. Good afternoon.
Absolutely. So, my first question to you is, as everyone was aware, China and the US weren't there, two of the world's biggest carbon emitters, two of the world's biggest economies as well. If we look at Nigeria's role at COP30 as the largest country, most populated country in Africa, was our presence felt at COP30? How consequential was our presence at COP30 this year?
Well, thank you for having me. The truth of the matter, therefore, is that, of course, Nigeria went there with a delegation. But the most important thing we should ask ourselves is what is the capacity of those that took there? What's their own level of understanding of what the issues are? Because I'm speaking from the point of development communication. And we need to understand that quite a lot of the conversation about climate change is not really about the existence of climate change. It's about the communication failure. The question therefore becomes, what kind of conversation are we even having with total exclusion of the communities that are being impacted? And I ask you this again, where are the voices of the rural population, and where are the voices of the rural farmer? Where are the voices of the communities who actually live climate change as experience? So for me, really, the problem is not climate change. The problem is communication failure. But let me also add that when we have this kind of conference, the COP conference, we need to achieve three things clearly. Otherwise, if we do not achieve these three things, other things we are doing, we are just basically making noise. One of which is that the people must understand what the issues are. Two is that the people must believe to be part and parcel of the problems. And three, the people must take action. So these are the conversations that we must streamline as we have conversation about climate change. So it's not about the Committee of Nations coming every year to have this conversation, but what is the level of participatory communication in the project design and the project implementation? I think that the most important thing is not even about the spending the money, it's the impact that needs to be looked into. And this cannot come without participatory communication and what I call participation in government, in development. This is what it is.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oseni. I really appreciate your last point about the participatory aspect, talking about how it's important to have the voices of rural farmers represented, for instance. Now, based on how things played out and the essentials that you mentioned, the three essentials, did we cover even one in that regard from Nigeria, the Nigerian representation?
Well, what has happened over time? I think that the COP itself started as far back as 1995. I think the first one took place in Germany, in Berlin, in Germany, as far back as 1995. And you ask yourself, since that conversation, what is the relative level of countries' commitment to climate change mitigation and adaptation? That's the issue. Secondly, what is even the officials' understanding of what the climate change is? Secondly, what is even our understanding of how do we get the people to even believe they are part of the solution? And three, back is what are we doing? For me, really, I think that what we really do, or what we do, is that we use climate change as a global avenue to bring in people. And people talk about it. You see people send government delegation. I don't have problem sending government delegation, but Nigeria can send government delegation. But what is the level of the competence and capacity of the people you're sending to have a clear understanding on environmental communication and development communication? That's what matters. So for me, really, if you ask me, as we speak today, of course, Nigeria has policy. We have seen efforts to addressing climate change. But the reality on ground, therefore, is that in this effort, in this intervention, how are this intervention designed to ensure that we record success? For me, really, of course, yes, but we should reduce climate change communication as an avenue for international relation. It is not just about international diplomacy. It is about a serious business that the countries must make commitments at the global level or at the global stage. Then you come back to your country and sit down and begin to have real conversation about how do you design bottom-up approach with a clear participatory involvement of the people who have clear understanding of what the issues are. So we need to move away from what I call performative development to redevelopment. And this is what it is. So your question, whether Nigeria has even achieved any of the three things I mentioned, I think that we are still in the process because a whole lot of people, there's a heavy conversation, controversial conversation about whether really climate change exists. It is not that climate change exists or the issue. Of course, climate change does exist, but what has failed all of us is communication. So this idea of what we do, because I need us to understand that public relations is not communication. Communication really is about dialogue and negotiation. So we need to design a framework that will domicile communication in such a way that it must begin to address development, not the PR, not all this noise here and there, and at the end of the day, we think we are doing anything. Because if we continue the way we are going, the conversation around climate change will just be like the conversation we have had about millennial development goals and now sustainable development goals. And the question is that what has changed? Nothing is going to change because the communities you are designing the project for, the communities you are designing the intervention for, the people you are designing the intervention are completely excluded from the conversation. And you can't do elite consultancy intervention and expect that at the end of the day you are going to have success. The communities must be part of the project design and the conversation, the discussion. You can't exclude rural farmers, you can't exclude rural population, and you're just talking about climate change. And if I ask you a question now, what really is climate change called in your language? You may not really know. So I think that we need to get serious and leave about climate change politics and begin to do the real things that we ought to do.
That's a really good point. But as you know, we're in Nigeria currently dealing with so many other challenges. Is there a sense that there's an intentionality in this administration, or historically, has Nigeria ever been very committed to tackling climate change as it relates to us?
Well, I know that we have the Ministry of Environment, and I know that we have a Climate Change Council, and I know that we have policies on that. But what I'm saying is, look, you cannot, it's not everybody, if you look at COP, for instance, you can see that every country there was making commitment. And I know that Nigeria has shown relative level of commitment, but this commitment must not be seen on paper. And even if you look at even the policymakers, even the political, what is the level of climate change communication going on in the National Assembly? What is the level of climate change communication going on at the level of Ministry of Environment?
Of course.
So we need to understand that our commitment must go beyond policy pronunciation down to it must be something that we need to transform promises to real impact and real impact. But let me also add that it is important that within the NGOs, within the policymakers, and within the development agencies, what matters for us, or what matters for me, it is impact, not activities. This idea, because even the COP itself is all about activities. This idea of holding workshop here and there, taking pictures and doing paparazzi here and there, it is not what it is. What matters is that you have spent $1 million. Yours in climate change intervention, congratulations. But you need to show us. You need to show us impact. We need to see success story. We need to see impact from what you did, not really about activities. And that's why, that's the way I think the Nigerian state should look at it from.
Fantastic. You also mentioned that we should move away from performative development to real development. We'd like to thank you for your insightful analysis on this very crucial matter. Dr. Audu Oseni, many thanks for joining us. Thank you.